In today's video, I had the honor and privilege of interviewing and talking to Dr. Jason Lisle, who is an author of one of my favorite science curriculums and one of my favorite books that goes very nicely with the science curriculum. I have them right here, but I will also leave links down in the description box below if you're interested in purchasing these or looking at any of his articles, as well as a video of a flip through. I hope you guys enjoy, and feel free to leave me some comments letting me know what you think. So thank you so much, Dr. Lisle, for coming on my channel and talking about your astronomy curriculum. So we have Taking Back Astronomy, which isn't necessarily a curriculum, but we read it. Like, we've read it twice, and we've read it together as a family and individual. And you also have Stargazers. So I just wanted to ask you, in your own words, could you highlight some portions of both of those books?
Yeah, sure. So Taking Back Astronomy. So this is actually the first book that I wrote, and it's quite thin. It was surprising. When the first time I wrote a book, I thought, man, this is going to be like a novel, and then it printed. And I'm like, really? It was just to give people an introduction to astronomy, and from a distinctly Christian perspective. I want to show people that it doesn't make sense to think of this universe as just the result of a Big Bang or something like that. My goal here was to show that the Bible is right when it speaks about astronomy. And so there's a chapter on that. There's a chapter on the age of the universe, which is something that I take a real interest in. That's something that's interesting to me, is the fact that the Bible gives us a time scale that, I mean, let's just be honest. If you read the Bible just without trying to bring in the presuppositions of the world, you'd say, yeah, the world's something like 6,000 years old based on scripture, about 4,000 years between Adam and Christ. And that was 2,000 years ago. So something like 6,000 years. What people don't realize is there's so much evidence in astronomy that confirms that. You see, we're taught, well, the universe is 13.8 billion years old. The Earth's 4.5 billion years old. And that's a story. That is a story about the past that people use to try and interpret. Secularists use that to try and interpret the evidence. And a lot of Christians get intimidated. They think, well, there must be science for that. Actually, the science is perfectly consistent with what the Bible teaches. And so there's a chapter on that issue. There's a chapter on the starlight issue. And I think I've grown in the way that I described that since writing that book, but nonetheless, the information there is still accurate. So it's just kind of to give people a taste of how astronomy can be used really as a segue to the gospel, to see how the universe is consistent with what the Bible teaches. There's a chapter that talks about some of the things the Bible specifically said about the earth being round, for example. That is taught in scripture in passages like Job 26:10, where it describes Earth's terminator as a circle, and that only works if the earth is a sphere. And that was written at a time when most people didn't believe that. Job's around 2000 BC. Most people did not believe in a round earth at that point, but the Bible mentioned it. And today we have pictures of the earth from space and confirming that the Bible's right about that. Or that the number of stars is humanly uncountable. The Bible talks about Abraham's descendants being as the stars of heaven, as the sand which is upon the seashore, a humanly uncountable number. And that might have been hard to believe when it was written, because the number of stars you can see with the naked eye was somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000. You could count to that. It would be tedious, but you could do it. Whereas in 1608, the telescope was invented. In 1609, Galileo takes his own and points it up. 1610, he starts seeing all kinds of wonderful stuff, and he sees that the Milky Way is not just this cloud. It's comprised of billions of stars. Today, we think there's at least 100 billion, maybe 400 billion stars in our own galaxy, and there's at least as many galaxies. It's uncountable, and that's something that the book mentions. So it's really an apologetic resource. It's to give you information from astronomy that you could use to challenge someone who is not as yet a Christian, to say, maybe you need to rethink some things, because the science really does confirm what the Bible teaches. And then the other book, Stargazer's Guide to the Night Sky. Now, it's very different. This is the one. It's funny because this one I wanted to make it kind of a pocket guide, a very practical guide. And when I ended up writing it, it was the opposite of the other one, which I thought would be thick. This one ended up being pretty thick, but it's basically how to, it's not an apologetics book. It's how to enjoy the night sky from a Christian perspective. I love astronomy. I love it. And when I get my telescope out and see these magnificent things that the Lord created, I worship doesn't have to be emotional, but it can be. And a lot of times when I've spent time just praising God and looking at his creation, I feel very close to the Lord after that. And it kind of resets my thinking. It makes me realize how small any problems I have are. Because you look at the universe, you feel very small. You realize how big God is to create all that and to care about me. And so there is, in fact, the last section of the book, there is the gospel message in it. So I didn't want to leave that out, because I didn't want people to appreciate God's beauty without appreciating the God who created all that and entering into a right relationship with him. But basically, Stargazer's Guide is how to have fun with the night sky. It's very practical. The first 2 chapters are about motions, how things move in the sky. And the primary reason that things move is the Earth's spinning, the Earth's rotating. And so everything seems to rise in the east and set in the west. People know the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, but everything does that. And that's because the Earth's on the other way. And so it allows you to kind of picture how things look and how they look different times of year. We see different constellations in the summer evening sky than we do in the winter evening sky. And why is that? Allows you to do that. And what about the phases of the moon? And I mean, if I used to keep track of it. I don't do a lot of astronomy in the winter, but because it's cold out. But during the summer, I usually know what the phase of the moon is, just because I kind of keep track of it, and I know when it's going to rise and when it's going to set. Maybe not to the minute, but I know approximately when, based on the phase. Anybody can do that. And the first chapter of the book shows you how to do that, to know when the moon's going to be out and what phase it's in. Chapter 2 goes into a little more depth if you wanted to know how to calculate some of these things. It's not college level though. It's basic stuff that you can do, because in a college level astronomy class, you might actually have to go through and do some calculations on figuring exactly when things are going to rise. But it just gives you a feel for it. There's a chapter on the human eye, and that was kind of fun to write, because you think, well, why would I need that? Well, the eye is what you use when you do astronomy, and your eye is an amazingly well-designed camera. It's better than any man-made camera that has ever been produced in terms of its versatility and its ability to dark adapt and so on. But there are ways, if you understand the mechanism of the eye and how the Lord designed it, there are ways you can maximize what you see out in space. Your eye has the ability to see very faint things if you know how to use it. Part of it is remaining in a dark condition for a long period of time. You remain in dark condition for 15 minutes, you'll find you can suddenly see things you couldn't see before. You wait another half an hour, you can see even more, and so on. Your eye is dark adapting. And you can ruin that in seconds by turning on a bright light. And so that's one of the things you don't want to do when you're outside enjoying the night sky, is to turn on a bright light. If you have to read something, use a red light, because of the way your eyes are designed. The rods that you use to see at night are not sensitive to red. So you can see something, you can read something, and then it doesn't ruin your dark adaptation. So there's a chapter on that. There's a chapter on telescopes and how to use them, what kind you might want to get. I get a lot of questions. What telescope should I get? Well, what are you looking for? How much do you want to spend? And so those are the questions that you want to ask, and what do you want to get out of it, and so on. Because there are telescopes where you can point, you can push in, go to this thing and it'll just move there. And those are a little more expensive than the ones that you have to figure it out yourself. And so those are some of the things people consider. Bigger is always better when it comes to telescopes, because you can see fainter things that are at greater distances perhaps, or at least are fainter otherwise. But then they're heavier to move. So is this something you're going to throw in the backseat of your car? Then it probably won't be a 16-inch, Newtonian. But in any case, and then there are chapters on planets, on the moon, on deep sky objects, how to enjoy these things. Where are they? There's star charts in the book that tell you how to find these things. And so that's kind of fun. And it also includes a planosphere. So that's this little guy right here. These are neat. I didn't invent these, but they're neat. What you do, it's got the time, and then it's got the date. And what you do is you line up the date with the time, and it'll show you what the stars will look like at that date and time. And so that's kind of fun. And as far as I know, mine is the only planosphere that compensates for daylight savings time. So that was my little invention. So I think that's kind of neat. The other ones, I did that. Yeah, I added that to that. And I looked online. I couldn't find any others that compensate for that. But you'll see the white versus the dark. It's daylight saving time versus standard time. So
that's cool.
Maybe they're going to do away with that, but maybe not. It hasn't passed the House, so we'll see. So I'll have to redesign it if we switch to daylight savings all year.
Okay, yeah, next version, or yeah.
And
Next.
I'm probably gonna add a chapter at some point too,
Mhm.
because in the last few years I got night vision goggles are now becoming where they're affordable for someone like me, and that changes the game a little bit because now you can see things that you can't see naked eye, and they're sensitive to red, so it kind of changes the formula a little bit. And so I might end up adding a chapter, but in any case, it's just how to enjoy the night sky from a Christian perspective. It's a lot of fun. I use the first two chapters of it when I teach college level classes on astronomy at the Master's University. But so it could be used for college level. I actually think the first two chapters are the hardest. If you can make it through those, the rest of the book is smooth sailing and could easily be understood by anyone in middle school. In fact, you could even skip the second chapter for anyone in middle school. The first chapter gives you the basics. Uh, Chapter 2 is a little more advanced. You could skip it and go right to 3 and just start enjoying the night sky.
Yeah, and I remember that's one thing we did is we bought a telescope like right away when we got that, and I don't know, it was like a family. It was kind of a family affair, and I thought it was just so perfect for homeschoolers. Just it's more bonding time, like because it takes a while to learn how to set up a telescope, which I didn't realize that because I've always gone to like the museum to look in their telescopes. And yeah, it feels like confession time. But yeah, it took a while and but we all worked through it together and yeah, looking at things. The kids love looking at the planets and even just recently the stars we pulled it out when the two planets were close together.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I was watching Jupiter and Venus this last
yeah,
few weeks. They're beautiful. Watch them, and they finally passed each other. So
yeah, it was awesome. So and I thank you for that book tremendously. Like I loved it so much. So then I was going to ask you, you know, when you were young, what inspired you to study the stars?
I've loved astronomy since as far back as I can remember. Honestly, when I was a kid and we'd go to our local library, and for you youngsters, that's what people did before Google. Uh, we
Homeschoolers
could
don't go to the library. We live there.
I mean, I would go to I go. I didn't care about anything else. I would go to the astronomy books there. Occasionally, other sciences too. I like all sciences, but I've read every book in our local county library, which wasn't. We're a small county, so it wasn't as big a deal as it might sound. But those are the books that I would read. It's the beauty captured my heart right away. The beauty of outer space, these amazing pictures, and they're so beautiful. The colors and these magnificent sources of light. There's just something that's just wonderful about these little lights, these little gems that God created in the heavens, and the fact that He spoke those all into existence. And then, so it's beautiful, and it's huge. You know, you'd see these illustrations of here's Jupiter and here's the Earth compared to it. And you're really amazing. And then you think, well, that's big. And then you see Jupiter compared to the sun, and you're like, it gets even bigger. And you see the sun compared to some other star like Antares or Betelgeuse, and it's just amazing. And then the distances between them are just unfathomable. The fact that these enormous structures look like these little tiny pinpricks of light tells you that they're really far away, and the distances involved. So just I think the scale of it, the scale of the cosmos, that's always intrigued me. It's kind of abstract. Space is an environment where things are a little different. I love seeing the astronauts, floating there in the microgravity environment, and you see water droplets, and they come and they'll do these little things that don't happen on Earth.
Yeah.
That's so strange, and yet, of course, that's normal. Most of the universe is that way. It's Earth that's different. Gravity is the weird thing, but we're used to it. And so just the abstractness of it, the beauty of it. And then, of course, as I grew in my faith, recognizing that, the universe is one of the ways that God declares his glory to us, as Psalm 19:1 says. So it's one of the ways that everyone can see the majesty of God. And you don't have to have a telescope. You can go outside and look up. If it's a clear night, you can see these amazing gems. A telescope just amplifies the experience. It lets you see things that are farther away, and it's just fun. It's just a lot of fun. I love doing telescopes with people because I like doing it by myself too, but I love showing other people the majesty of the heavens because it's an experience for them too, especially Christians who know the Creator who spoke these things into existence, and they get to see some of his handiwork. is just enjoyable. Even, even though now that we have things like Google and you can see these amazing Hubble images and they're stunning, there is something really special about seeing it with your own eye.
Yeah.
It's not as clear as the Hubble images, but seeing it yourself, there's something about it it's just cool. It's just really neat.
Yeah. It reminds me, okay, so when I was an unbeliever, I remember when I was a teenager, looking at the sky and being completely intimidated by it, and it scared me. But then when I became a believer, all of a sudden I was comforted knowing that my God created all of this and he loves me. Like it was just, it was day and night, that transition.
Yep.
So,
The God who created all that, he's awesome. And if you're not right with him, you should be afraid, because he is a righteous judge and you're in sin and he's rightly angry at you. And that should be the worst fear that you'd ever feel. But if you're right with God, if he's paid for your sins, you realize, wow, the God who spoke that into existence cares about me and loves me and has promised me salvation. That's awesome.
Yeah. And also, you also said something that reminded me of that. Yes, we do use Google. I shouldn't say we live at the library.
Sure,
we do use Google and YouTube and all the tools. But there's that video. There's that video where it zooms in. You know what I'm talking about? Each planet, and it gets bigger and bigger. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It just reminded me of that video.
Yeah. In fact, I did something very similar to that. And before that, actually, at the planetarium and the Creation Museum, the planetarium show The Created Cosmos. I wrote that, and at the end, it goes out as far as we can go into the universe with current technology, and then it zooms all the way back in to the Earth, and you get a feel for just how immense the universe is. It gives you a little bit of a taste of that. And I do the thing with the stars too, where I'll compare the different star sizes, and you keep zooming out, and you realize, wow, God has unlimited power. And he just declared, let there be light, and there was light. He just speaks these things into existence, and they come into existence. And that's the kind of God that we serve. That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay. No, I'm just like done. Mic drop. Okay, but I do have more questions. Okay. So, but I almost think you kind of answered them. Your favorite chapter to write was that the eyes.
It might have been. Yeah, the eye was a fun chapter, and it's one you might not think of. I think probably my favorite, though, would be the chapter on the planets. I love looking at the planets through a telescope because unlike everything else in the universe looks the same as the last time you looked at it. And it's still fun to see it again. Like I love looking at the M13 globular cluster. It's stunningly beautiful, but it looks exactly the same every time you look at it. Planets don't. Planets look different every time because they rotate. So you see Mars is really fascinating because Mars only comes close to the Earth every 2.1 years. And that's the only time when it's really good to look at Mars. Other times it's so small you can't see much. But every 2.1 years, you can see surface details on it. And Mars rotates. And the cool thing is Mars rotates its rotation period is 24 hours and 36 minutes. So it's rotating at about the same rate the Earth does. And so as I'm rotating, it's rotating. And if you stay up a couple hours, you can see new features coming around. You can see it rotating, and that's just cool. Or Jupiter and its moons. Jupiter, you can watch the moons. It's got 4 really bright ones that you can see in any backyard telescope. Even good binoculars will pick them out. Yeah. And you come back an hour later, and they've moved a little bit. You come out the next night, they're on, Io's on the other side of the planet now. It's just fun to watch these things. Every 6 years, the moons start casting their shadows on each other, and you can watch one moon eclipse another. It takes about 15 minutes. It's neat. And Jupiter, sometimes you get the great red spot where you can it's fun to look for that. Often it's on the other side. You think I've got a 50% chance of seeing it. No, it's more like 10% because unless it's dead center, it's very hard to see.
Okay.
So if you go out at a random time, you've got only a 10% chance of seeing it. Of course, we know where it's at, and you can look it up on the internet. You can Google that and see where the red spot's going to be. That's fun to watch. Sometimes other storms will develop on it too. Saturn, every now and then it'll develop a storm on it, and you can see either a black spot or a white spot depending on the nature of the storm. That's fun to watch. Yeah, planets are neat because they never look quite the same way twice. You never know what you're going to get with the planets. Yeah. And so they're just a lot of fun. So that was a fun chapter to write. But really, the whole book was fun because it was just I enjoy astronomy, and my goal in the book was to help other people to enjoy astronomy. Really.
Yeah. And okay, I know the answer to this, but it's just so much fun. Your favorite planet?
I really like the Earth. I'm very partial to the Earth. All my friends live there. It's got the best restaurants.
But now, least favorite planet.
Probably Mercury. Mercury never looks great in a telescope. Mercury's hard to spot because it's close to the sun, and so you can only see it shortly after sunset or shortly before sunrise, depending on where it's at. And it's small. It's only a third the size of the Earth, and so when you see it in a telescope, it's always small, and it's almost impossible to make out any surface details. All the other planets. Well, Neptune doesn't look like much either, but it's cool to say you've seen Neptune because it's a beautiful blue color, and that's cool to see. It doesn't look quite like a star. Stars are not terribly colorful, but they do have some color. But all the other planets, there's some features. The planet Uranus, it's usually pretty featureless, but occasionally we'll get clouds on it, and you can see its moons too if you have a decent telescope. So all the other planets are fun to look at. Saturn's probably the most fun to look at, and because of that lovely ring system. I never get tired of seeing Saturn's rings. Yeah, they're just beautiful. Yeah, and everybody else too. I love showing other people Saturn for the first time because the reaction's always the same. It's first of all, it's wow, and then they look down the telescope like, are you tricking me? Is that a slide? Because it just looks so unearthly, you know? It's just so bizarre. So I love showing people Saturn. Jupiter as well. Mars every 2.1 years when it comes close to the Earth. Otherwise, it looks terrible. It's just a little red dot. But every 2.1 years, it's fun to see the surface features on it. Occasionally, Mars will get a global dust storm, and that wipes out all the features and looks kind of bland. But it's fun to watch these things happen in space and to see them happening, 1 week after the next and so on. It's fun.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, so a little bird told me that you discovered a planet. This is I don't know if you want to share or not.
Yeah. So years ago, it's been several years. I wanted to follow up and do more of this because right now, one of the coolest things we're doing in astronomy is discovering planets orbiting other stars. It's just cool. Because when I was a kid, we didn't know of any planets outside of our solar system. None. We had Pluto was a planet back then, so we had 9 planets, and that was it. And now we know of at least 5,000 planets in the universe that are orbiting other stars, and most of them have not been directly imaged because the glare of the stars are millions of times brighter than a planet orbiting. It makes them very difficult to see in a telescope. But a few of them have been imaged with modern technology. But mostly the way we discover them, occasionally a solar system is edge on relative to our solar system. And so a planet, when it's crossing in front of its star, will block a little bit of the starlight. Now, planets are much smaller than the stars. So it might, it's a thousandth of a percent or something. It's a very small change in the star's brightness. But we have telescopes that are designed to measure the brightness of the star very precisely. We had the Kepler spacecraft, which was the one that I used. And the data for that is public domain. Anybody can do what I did. I just took the time to do it. I took a look at the Kepler data, and I looked at the brightness of the star over time, and you can plot it over time. And there's a little dip when the planet crosses in front of the star. The brightness of the star drops just a little bit. And what you do is you try to find more than one, and that's because the planet's orbiting around the star multiple times. And sure enough, every 211 days, I found that there was a planet that was blocking a little bit of its starlight. And based on the amount of light it was blocked, I was able to calculate the size of the planet. It's about 7 times the radius of the Earth, so it's big. The gravity would be crushing. You don't want to live there, but still, it was neat. And as far as I know, I'm the first person to find that and report that and calculate its period and so on. And so I reported it to an organization that deals with those things. But it was fun. Scientific discovery is fun because when you first discover something, it's something that is known only to you and God, and that's just kind of cool. And then, of course, you tell everybody about it, and then everybody knows. But still, it's fun to have this little secret for a few minutes that it's something that's profound about the universe that's known only to you and God. That's kind of neat.
Okay, that's really cool. I'm so glad I asked that question, and thank you so much for sharing.
Sure, yeah.
So, and that was all the questions I have. I wanted to thank you so much for coming on here. I had so much fun.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Once again, thank you so much for watching the video. Like I said, links in the description box below. And if you've never subscribed to this channel and you're all about like homeschooling and finding resources and learning about homeschooling kids with disabilities, etc., check out my channel. This is your jam. Okay. Anyway, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day. Bye.